Good evening once again. My name is Christopher. I'm welcoming you to this discussion program on Plain Talk, at which we will discuss VAT and Education Part 2. You will recall last week we had a panel of guests in which they all made the case for the absolute removal of VAT and Education, indicating that it was counterproductive to national development. It was absolutely unkind at an individual level. There was a complete lack of appreciation and empathy for persons from poorer families that are scraping to get by through private education. I want to start by introducing our guests, and Swami Aksharananda. We all know him. His the saffron robe. Ms. Oshana Rogers, Mr. Andrew Hercules, and Mr. Jonathan Yearwood, all newcomers to this program. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on Plain Talk.
Thank you.
Tell me, give me your assessment as where we are on this business, because what has happened, this budget change was announced November 28th. There was widespread dissatisfaction from several quarters, complaints. There was I think a petition, it over 15,000 persons. Now we are at a situation where the VAT is actually being charged on the school fees. Parents are actually finding that they've got to dish out 14% more. What progress have we made over the past week and maybe since the budget, as far as the concerns and complaints and protests over the VAT and education? Any one of you?
Andrew, you go ahead. You started.
Yeah, he had started before.
Well,
I was trying to cover for GPL.
well, progress. Well, I mean, that's a very positive word. I note that I think School of the Nations, they would have engaged based on the protest, in fact, the electronic petition that they had. I was very hopeful that given the numbers in terms of persons who would have petitioned that, and that engagement would have bear some amount of fruit. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. So other private schools, notably the one for which my child attends, Mays, we joined that fight because for us, we felt it's not, I won't say an attack, but it's something on education, something for which, as a child, it's going to benefit the entire country. So to answer your question in terms of what progress, I would have paid the 14% VAT on my child tuition fees.
And you don't consider that progress?
No, I don't consider that progress. What we've opted to do is to sort of re-engage the principal parties, being in the administration. So we are at the stage where we're hoping to have a second sit down, and hopefully with more numbers that we have than before, so that we can send that seriousness that, hands off of education.
Oshana, would you like to go next?
As I stated before the cameras came on, we got a toe in the door. That is what we have in the door right now. The protest action that we have been having, as this gentleman pointed out, we've had 5 protests so far. I attended only 3. We are getting some attention. We're getting the minister's attention. We're getting the cabinet's attention, and that is what we want. We want them to hear our side, our plight. We want them to hear it from us as the parents of these students that are going to this school. So Friday's town hall meeting is a step in the right direction, and we hope that that meeting actually bears fruit.
Well, I think the Friday's meeting, unless the Minister of Finance is there, will be a complete waste of time, because the Minister of Education has nothing to do with VAT. VAT is a finance business. It's not an education business. This is not an education policy that the Ministry of Education can deal with. This is a financial problem which is dealt with by the Minister of Finance, who is the man that implemented the VAT. Therefore, he is the person that should be removing the VAT. And I honestly do hope that he is there on Friday to represent himself and his ministry as to why they cannot remove the VAT on the education.
Well, to add to
That's it.
that, sorry, not cutting you. Well, to
You-
add to that, whether or not the Minister of Finance is there, the government will be represented. And that's what we want. We want them to hear our voice. Because at the end of the day, the cabinet can make a decision. And that is what we're hoping for. Because if the Minister of Finance is saying that not to take all that, and then the other persons who are involved in the cabinet, the other ministers say, well, look, this thing is quite unreasonable, let us go ahead and take it off, then we're getting somewhere. So whether or not Minister Jordan is there, we want to be heard. We're going to stand up and talk to whoever is willing to listen. I think that is a major part of where the movement started. We started out with protest action, we started out with a petition, then we wrote letters, and it just keeps escalating from there. And as I said, we got somewhere in terms of the meeting that will be held on Friday. Whether it bears fruit or not is left to be
Well,
seen.
you actually had some progress today with you met with the
Exactly,
minister.
exactly. He was kind enough to invite us up to his office, and a few of the parents that were there, we sat down, we had a very nice conversation with him. He listened. He listened to us. He listened to everything we had to say. We had a nice engagement with him. Another member of his staff came in and sat in on the meeting as well. So that is a step in the right direction. As I said, where Friday's town hall meeting goes is yet to be seen, but we hope it goes in the right direction.
Swami?
I'm a little less a little less hopeful. I mean, it's I did not get the sense in the meeting today with the minister that he has a strong.
This is Minister Rupnarayan.
Right, that he has a strong position. He listened. He was amiable and respectful and so on. But we were hoping that it would be the Minister of Education who would represent the position of parents on this whole question of
Right.
that. But one does not get the sense that he is very strong on the issue. And that's why I don't think I'm very hopeful that he will really stand up for parents. I mean, this to me is an anomaly because, I mean, those of us who know Rupert Rupnarayan from the old days will know what sort of person he is in terms of his philosophy, right? And now that he is in the government system, you see somewhat different person.
Can I ask, apparently you were both at the meeting this afternoon
Correct.
with the minister.
Correct.
What was his response? Apart from listening cordially and being very nice and whatever, what was his response to the group?
Well, he did say he'll have to talk to some officials,
Yeah.
right? And I think he mentioned some people from GRA.
GRA and the Minister of Finance.
Except that this has nothing to do with GRA. This is
Right.
a policy issue.
Correct.
Absolutely nothing to do with GRA.
GRA is just the enforcement.
Correct. Correct.
They administer the act, nothing else.
Correct.
That's it.
That's right.
Correct.
So that must have been a slip. Does it give you some hope? As you said, Swami, does it give you some hope that, remember, we have a coalition government.
Right.
Here is it, the WPA was one of the first to have gone into a coalition arrangement with the PNCR. So every person has some leverage in this matter. The AFC has leverage, the WPA has leverage.
Yeah.
I think you should put the
theoretically-
word supposed to have.
Theoretically, yes, but I mean, I'm not so sure. You see, power is an interesting thing. I mean, out of power, we behave in a certain way. We have certain views. We express certain views. But all of us know, and all of that power has a way of changing people. I'm not saying corrupting them, but
Right.
changing them.
Some for the better and some for the worse.
Their perspectives on things change, and I think this is a case with our education minister.
Just to add,
Yes, Andrew.
I think as well on the subject of power, I don't believe that sometimes maybe I want to say that the government may have good intentions. I just want to go out there and say that, but you ought to at least sit down and recognize that Guyana over the past is known for producing good educators, persons who would have done well for us, whereas in Guyana and abroad. So for me, as a person sitting in the cabinet representing, this is not a shot at the Minister of Education, but I for sure would be making strong representation, hands off my sector. Because I'm sure these are some of the conversations for which at that level,
They ought to have.
well,
Yeah.
I'm assuming that's an assumption on my part.
You see, both our Minister of Education and the President benefited from a kind of education system in those days that it's only a dream now in our country.
Exactly, it doesn't
You know?
exist anymore.
Right?
And what that was one of the points we raised in the meeting today, that there was a complete shift in how the education system was back then as opposed to now. So you can't be saying to parents that, yes, our public schools are great, our public schools are producing. When you look at the results, I think Swami has that on this paper here. It's troubling what the public schools are actually producing as opposed to the private schools.
Swami, you'd like to give those statistics?
Well, yeah. I mean, this is from the ministry's website.
This is the Ministry of Education's website.
Yeah, right. In 2016, 14,386 students from both public and private schools wrote the NGSA exams, right? And usually the ministry gives the results of the top 1%. This was equivalent to 114 and 30 students who were eligible for that. They're 144. 114 that was apparently sent to Queens and 30 that was sent to Bishops. In Region 3, there were 57 primary schools. I'm talking about Region 3.
Alone.
57 primary schools. Only 6 of them could account for passes in this top 1%. Only 6%.
Six
only
out of
57. Nationally, there are 406 primary schools, and only 38 of those 406 primary schools could account for passes in the top 1%.
So, can I add in?
Yeah. So,
Based
So
on
300, if I just make this point, 368 produced 0.
that's right. I'm talking in the list
Top
of
one.
National system, yes,
in the
yes,
top 1%.
produced 0, contributed 0 to the top 1%.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
That's pretty serious.
Troubling.
shows how terrible your public school system really is. And I'll go a bit further than that, because going on the Ministry of Education's website as well, the top 1% of 2016 grade 6 students, there were a total of 158 students in the top 1%. 158 students. Of that number, 99 came from private schools. 59 came from the public schools. That means there was only 37% of the 1% top students coming from the public sector. And our government is saying that we should shut private schools down.
Well, they didn't say that. They
Well,
said it should be.
but
They
putting-
said this. What they did say. They did say that if you can afford to send your child to
Yeah.
private school,
Mr.
You
Ram,
can afford
no,
excuse
no,
me,
Can
that
I,
is
fin-
equivalent
can I
to
please
me-
finish?
Sure.
Can I please finish? They did say if you can afford to send your child to private school, you can afford to pay 40% VAT. And so I want to come to the. You'll continue, and Jonathan, because I want to ask Swami. I want to ask all of you, what is the profile of a child that goes to your school? Is it this rich kid, or parents rolling in money, driving up with a BMW or a Mercedes Benz?
as an accountant, what percentage of Guyana is wealthy?
It's extremely low.
Exactly.
There's a serious concentration of wealth with a handful of people.
Exactly.
Right.
We have more concentration of wealth in Guyana than America has.
So the average family in Guyana is just above water level. Nose slightly above water, breathing, and any waves, we tend to drown.
But,
So,
Can I ask
Yeah,
Swami?
yeah,
no,
Could you
on-
tell us what the
yeah,
profile
yeah,
of
right,
your
right.
the children
Right.
is, and what the profile of the parents
Correct.
is?
There's we all agree that there's a relationship between education standards and economic standards, right? The tendency for students coming from poorer family would be to perform. This is a tendency. It's they would tend to be poor performers at school also. What happens at SVN is that
SVN.
Saraswati Vidya Niketan.
That's your school,
right?
yes.
Is that the average common entrance marks that a person has that gets into that school is about 450. I'm talking about the average, right? People with as low as 390 marks. At that level, I don't think the government system even marks the students anymore. They just give them a minimum score, right? So it's about 300. So 300 from 390 up, students start coming to that school. We don't have a cutoff mark. We admit anybody who comes to the school. So we have 20% or more of our students who are admitted into that school are people who have scored marks that can't get them into any of the so-called recognized high schools.
And when you say they recognize, you don't mean that top 1%
No,
high school?
no. We are talking about the recognized high schools on the Western Marara.
Wow.
On Region 3, right? There are 5 of those schools. Now, if your child doesn't get into one of the 5 of those schools, and the minimum amount of marks needed is 420 to get into the so-called lowest of those 5, there are remaining other schools, formerly the community high schools and the SSRP schools. Now, nobody who can barely afford would want their child to go to those schools, right? So this, in a sense, you get an idea of the kind of students that would come to SVN. Now, the interesting thing about SVN, and this is why I believe this is going to be a real blow to us, a really ugly blow, is that what the school does with those students who have scored less than 400 marks, we have a pass rate of more than 90% of those very students. I am challenging the system. If those students were to have gone back to the same public schools, they would have been in a dead-end situation.
And the question is, was the economic means of those children?
Yeah, and again,
What would it be like?
Because we are essentially in a rural area, rural community, less availability of money and things like that. And when we look at how parents are paying, right? We see the challenges that people have to pay. It is not.
You mean they can't pay one lump sum?
No. You know, we try to make it as helpful
Flexible.
as possible, as flexible as possible for parents to be able to pay. And again, even our fees are nowhere in comparison to the fees that the schools in Georgetown charge, right? And yet we know the challenges that parents face in paying.
So, Oshana and Jonathan, this you hear the profile. We can say Swami School is a rural school. We know their economic means limited and challenged. Rich kids at Mays?
No. To be very honest, you have a mix of both. You have people that can afford and those that are trying to make ends meet to afford. So you have a mix of both. At most of the schools in Georgetown, you find that. You have a mix of parents like that. You can see the BMWs rolling up. We're not running away from that fact. And then you can see the little person bringing their child to school on a motorbike, on a bicycle. So you have a range of parents at May schools, at least for what I can see. And I think Andrew can attest to the same fact as well.
But I think we need to look back at this question. What does it mean? Are we implying that if parents are rich, they don't have a need for quality education?
That's a good point.
Because it's okay because they're rich.
We're going to come back to that question. I wanted Andrew to give me his view on the same. You drive up in a BMW.
I mean, like my colleague said from Mays, you will find that there is going to be a percentage of persons who are more than likely can afford the private education. But I think largely, I can speak for myself, when you finish paying your tuition, it's a struggle. And you're making that sacrifice so that your child can be exposed. I believe personally, when I look at least the children who would attend private school as compared to those children who attend public school, there is a difference. That's my experience. In terms of, simply put, the level of confidence, it's different. And to me, while the curriculum is probably the same when compared to the public school, I think they are ahead by maybe months in terms of what they cover and what they can cover. Mm-hmm. I'm not suggesting I don't know all of the details. I came from a public school. I'm a product of a public school, but education and the system has evolved. Yeah. And I think that's one of the reasons why we have private schools. So to answer your question, I believe the profile, it's a mixture. But I think if I'm to quantify it, I'll probably say somewhere around 70 to 30 who can just barely afford, and probably have 30% who can, manageably afford.
So 70% would be the ones struggling.
Correct.
And,
And,
and that would reflect in the lunch kit, even if you now have to, that money has got to come from somewhere.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to know that just it is not cheap to send your child to a public school also. If you take if you take a child coming from, say, the West Demerara, right, who comes to school in Georgetown on QC, okay, that child will have to pay, if the child comes in a contract bus, a minimum $3,000 a week. A minimum of $3,000, that's our school fees.
Yeah.
A minimum of $3,000 a week the child has to pay for traveling in a contract
What's your school
bus.
fees?
It's just above $3,000 a week, right? Now, that child from Form 2 already has to be attending several lessons,
Yeah.
right? You're paying another $3,000 a week or more for all the lessons that the child has to attend. And I'm talking about now, you are not going to send your child without money, without some extra cash, without some lunch money. So you're talking about roughly $10,000 a week that you have to find to send your child to a public school in Georgetown if you're coming from the west coast of Demerara.
Going
So,
back to
so so it is not cheap. Another and a very, very important point that many of us are missing here is that even as far as the public schools are concerned, who is responsible for their results? It is not the public school themselves, because all of the lessons, when you take that into consideration,
Yeah.
it is almost like a
Yes.
private entity
I was
just
providing
going to
the
that
results
point.
for your public schools.
Okay.
I was
That's the
just
point
going
you
to
want
that.
to make.
Yes, I was just going to that point because we raised that point today with the Minister of Education, whereas the public schools, there's a record that the kids are failing in the class, but yet still the teachers are giving lessons, extra lessons.
Yeah.
So how does that add up? How does that make sense? So you're paying the extra lessons fees to the teacher, who from 8 to 3:30 is supposed to be tasked with teaching my child the same thing she's teaching in here. She's teaching other lessons. So it doesn't add up. So what Swami is saying makes sense. You still have to find money out of pocket to send your children to public school. It's not free as they're putting it out there. Public education is free. It's not free. Because all of these things that he just indicated add up at the end of the month.
Yeah. Jonathan, what's your view on the social implications of all of this? And this rich kid, and you can afford to pay it.
My view is, first of all, let me state I'm not a parent with a child in private school. I am in private school. I am a private school student.
Yes.
At my age, I'm back at school, and it's very expensive. And I have students in my class with me who cannot afford to pay. We do a course every month, so we have to pay every month. So people pay as they get their salary. It's an automatic deduction. That's like paying your light bill. You pay for your course fees immediately.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as I mentioned, it's very expensive. So we all live on a budget. Out of a class of what I would consider 30 to 35 students, I only know of 2 students who are on scholarships, whose the company that they work for sent them to study and is paying the school fees. The rest of us struggle through salary. I have a student loan at the bank that I have to repay, struggle to make ends meet. So when you come now and you add 14% onto that school fee, I know for a fact that many of us...
That's a
myself-
deal breaker. That's a deal breaker.
That's
It
right.
can't work.
That's right. My batch of students are struggling to find the money to pay for that monthly course. At the moment, we've made one payment. We have another payment coming up. And we are struggling. We have to take our budget that we live on monthly and rework it completely. Whatever little extra disposable income we had is now gone. It's now gone.
You know, I have spoken with persons who are, one person who is a cleaner and trying to get her children, and her approach to making this commitment and sacrifice is, look, Mr. Ram, I don't want my children to grow up and looking for a job as a cleaner. To what extent is this government, is this policy sensitive to the opportunity which only education offers the majority of us?
I think it is a very unfriendly move in terms of no poor country like ours can afford to deal such a blow on education as we have done. Even the rich countries in the world do not. They secure education, they protect education, because it is the means of growth, it is the means of development, it is what changes lives. And if that is so key to our development, you are going to, destroy, then you are virtually destroying the future of our country.
Swami, our government loves to say that they love to compare our country, our little third world country, with the ABC countries of the world. They have that. Why can't we have that? Let me ask them this. First world country, Germany. Education is free from birth to tertiary education. University, absolutely free in Germany.
Yeah.
And that's a first world country. Why can't we have?
And not only for Germans, outsiders also go there. It attracts people. Yeah. What's your view on this? The empathy, the social value of this policy.
Well, first,
Given especially, Andrew, what you said about 70% of the parents, and maize is probably one of the better if you were to do a scale. I went to Giselle yesterday, and here these parents are struggling.
well, I mean, I wish to say that the implication, because when you're making a policy, obviously, and let me just say this let me qualify what I'm about to say. As a parent, I don't have a problem with tax and VAT as a principal means of generating revenue for the government.
On education?
No, not on education.
Okay.
So I'm prefacing what I'm about to say.
Mm-hmm.
So if when you're making or when you're about to implement or a policy, you have to decide who are the beneficiary and who is going to impact. Now, from our end, education is something that it's a universal right, and to me,
It's a constitutional right as well.
well, it's a constitutional right. For me, I think if anything else, we should be encouraging education. So it's not as my colleague said, it's not sensitive to some of the needs of what I would refer to as development indicators, because education is an indication of where your country is. If I'm wrong, it determines your standard of living amongst other stuff. I would want to believe everybody here was educated, at least what is at your primary, was educated in Guyana. So for me, when you sit and you say, let's decide on where we're going to generate revenue, I think it's insensitive, and I think it needs more thought. So that's when I personally believe, and we're pushing.
But they've had since November the 28th, the outcry began on November 29th. When do we get this more thought?
Well, I think we need more persons to be involved, because it's impacting more persons. It's not just the 4 persons sitting here. I mean, and I talk to persons privately, and they will say, because of how I would say politics is so sensitive, persons are trying not to be caught in that web. But for me personally, this is not a political issue. This is me as a parent, and I'm saying, leave my education alone.
Oshana? Politics?
Yes, that was one of the topics raised today in the meeting with the minister. And all of us were very vocal on that, because when we're standing up outside of the Ministry of Education protesting, people are passing and hurling a lot of statements. I don't want to repeat them, but they're trying to make it political, but it is not political. These are parents that feel that the government was not sensitive to their situation. The government can't make everybody happy. But when it comes to education, that is something that is important. Hands down, education is the key to success in any country. You cannot just look at it and say, okay, this is a commodity, tax it. That is being insensitive to the nation, to your future leaders of this nation.
In that sense, it's counterproductive.
It is counterproductive. And then people on the outside who are standing up, when we're standing up in that hot sun, are saying, oh, y'all are making this political when the PPP was in power. That is not what we're here to protest. We're here to protest the right of education and the fact that it should not be taxed. There is no value-added tax that needs to be added on it. It's not a commodity you can go and buy in a store. You can't buy your education. I can't go to Maze and say, I want a grade 6 assessment exam pass. I can't go and say I want a pass to go to QC. I can't go and buy it in a store. You have to let your children go through each phase of their school life. They have to grow, they have to mature, they have to learn. Look, my 5-year-old, she's going to be 6 later this month, said to me she wanted to be a lawyer. And I was so proud standing there listening to her. And I said, why you want to be a lawyer, my dear? She said, because she wants to defend people who can't defend themselves.
Wow.
At five, I was busy reading the Rampart Family when I was in school. Seriously, we have come a far way in this country where education is concerned. And to take us back and put us in a box, it is demeaning, to say the least. It's demeaning to the citizens. It's demeaning to the people who voted and put you in that position, and you didn't even give us a voice. We should have a voice to say, Mr. President, we don't agree with you on this. You can't implement, then let's talk. We have to talk and then implement.
But talking about the president, I mean, this is where I see a major contradiction as I've written also, because to me, it's a kind of
Your school hosted the president some time ago.
It's a kind of a gap between vision and policy. Here, on the one hand, the president speaks of a certain vision for education in this country, of making Guyana an education nation. Now, that is something that captured the imagination of everybody, you know. His interest in education, the way he related to young people and so on, it's amazing. Yeah. Now, so you have a certain vision, but that vision is completely negated in the policy, in the actual policy. And yeah, go ahead.
But not to stray away from the topic of education, as he's on that topic of the president's vision, it is transferring to every aspect in our daily lives, because taxes on everything. The president says he wants to open up the interior to foreign investment. That is a way to generate income into this country.
Yes.
Yet you put tax on domestic travel. To go into the interior, you got to pay tax. You got to pay tax, as the customer of ours said. You go and buy the gas to the gas station, you pay tax. You post it in the interior, you pay tax. So when the commodity finally gets to the customer is crying bitterly at how much they have to pay. Commodities have gone up tremendously in the interior. Yes, we have some business people that are taking advantage of the situation, but that is only because of their uncertainty of what tomorrow holds. So, as Swami pointed out, there is a vast contradiction between what is being said and what is being implemented. And I think someone needs to answer that question as to how you made all these promises. You filled our heads with all these things, and now when you come into office, you're doing something totally different from what you said to the Guyanese public.
There are two very famous and popular quotations. First, action speaks louder than words. Mm-hmm. And Mr. President has spoken a lot. And his actions are contradicting everything that he says.
Or his actions of his cabinet.
Well, he's responsible. The buck stops at him.
Yes.
So what they do, he's ultimately responsible for it. So
that's one.
When I say his actions, you refer to his cabinet's and his government's actions.
Yes.
They contradict everything that he says. Secondly, you cannot tax a country into prosperity. There is no way you can tax a country into prosperity. As you just mentioned, you're taxing interior flights. How do you expect people to get in there?
Right.
What about the people living there? How are they getting out? How are they conducting business? It's not going to happen. Instead of creating an environment, a government's job is to create an environment for the private sector to generate money, to generate business. Then they can tax that with the 30% on corporate tax to make money for the country. They're not only doing that.
Well, it's 40%.
It's 40%, no.
Yeah, 20, yeah. 27.5 and 40, yes.
But they have now made it even more difficult for companies they're also taxing the individual person heavily, much more heavily than they had before. We used to get a 33% income tax. Now they gave us some breaks on that. And yes, my salary take-home pay has increased by a little $4,000 or $5,000 a month, which I'm very grateful for.
Well, where is it going?
Hold on. The VAT has been reduced by 2%, which I'm grateful for. But then along comes the left hand to slap you with all the zero-rated items now being VATed. So the little extra money that you've gotten as disposable income has already disappeared further down the line because on everything that you buy now is VAT.
It would be interesting to find out what your in terms of calculating a basket of goods.
Yes,
now,
yes, yes.
What is it your income can do now versus what it did before?
Because this is having an inflationary effect as well.
Definitely, definitely.
When you remove those items from zero rated to exempt, you know what you've done. It means that the business person has to recover his input tax
Yeah.
from the consumer.
Correct.
Let's take a loaf of bread. They put tax on water, they put tax on electricity. A bakery uses a lot of water and a lot of electricity for the ovens. So the bakery will do one of two things. They will either raise the price to get back the 14% that they put on it, or they will make the bread smaller and sell you at the same price. But either way you look at it, you're getting less value for your dollar.
That's right. That's what's going on.
Jonathan, you've raised financial issues, so I'm going to put this question to you. Minister Jordan has said, I have $350 million that I expect to get out of this value-added tax on education. Tell me where I'm going to get it from. First of all, is that a fair question? Where does that $350 million figure come from?
Well, he's saying that he's going to get this $350 million off of parents paying VAT on private education. Well, Mr. Jordan, and he's also being quoted as saying that this $350 million he will use to jumpstart the Guyana economy. He's quoted as saying that he will use the $350 million off of the VAT on education to jumpstart the Guyana economy. So, Mr. Winston Jordan, I would like to tell you this. $350 million out of a $250 billion budget equates to 0.14%. How on earth can you stimulate an economy with a product that only generates 0.14% of your budget? That tells me, Mr. Jordan, that you are no economist. You cannot take this VAT money to jumpstart an economy.
Yeah, but Mr. Jordan is saying, I'm not aware that he has said that statement, but I
Quoted in the newspapers.
Okay. The issue is, where could he find $350 million? Assuming those numbers that he is saying that schools have not been filing return, so he's not even quite sure how much it is.
How much it is.
But
Let
let us say $350 million.
All right, let me give it to you straight off the bat. The Arthur Chung Conference Center, they reported saying that they're going to renovate that for $1 billion. That's what it was quoted as being as the cost of building it. Under the PPP government, it was quoted as being a cost of $1 billion to build it. Now our government is saying that they will cost $1 billion to renovate it. Isn't it better we just pull it down and build a new one? Why is it that something that was built
You
10
still
years
haven't
ago,
answered my question. So are you saying that
that's where they can get $350 million from? Something is not right in the renovation of the Chung Center that will cost $1 billion.
But if you were to take the entire capital budget, what's it, $56 billion or something like that, $350
It's
million
minuscule.
is minuscule.
It's a drop in the bucket.
If you were to take their expenditure, if you were to take the recurrent expenditure, if you were to just a tiny increase in some revenue, Why not cigarettes?
Let me give you let's
Cigarettes and alcohol.
let's not pick a fight with tobacco and alcohol.
No, this is not picking a fight.
Let me pick a fight with somebody else. Our government, we did the independence celebrations and we built Durban Park. And our government, somewhere along the line, a special purpose company was formed. They received donations, people went in, did whatever they had to do. And at the end of it all, our government said that they were going to take and accept the debts up to $500 million of that company. Why is our government taking $500 million to pay debts of a private company?
Well, it wasn't a private company; it was a government company.
I don't care what company it was.
In fact,
Will they take the company that I work for, take their debts and pay them? I'm sure my company would love that. But this is where they can find $350 million. Let that special purpose company find the $500 million to pay the debts.
Do you think it's fair? For the government to ask you? They've got all the numbers. You don't have the numbers. For you to tell them where this money must come from? Is that a fair question?
That is a totally inappropriate question, an unfair question, right? Because you have all the information, right? You are the ones planning the budget. You must know where the money is coming, how you can generate. How are you going to ask parents that question to tell us where you're going to get $350 million from?
Yeah, I find a way that we could get some. If the government
I'm not
is
sure
serious,
Mr. Jordan would want to listen to you after what you've just said about him.
if our government is serious and they've been quoted as saying that they're in a cash problem and let's recycle envelopes and use paper over twice.
That's an awful lot of envelopes you've got to
Well,
recycle.
let me ask them this. If you were serious and we were so cash strapped, why don't you, the minister, take a 50% cut in salary? You're earning $750,000, $800,000 a month. And we're in a cash strapped society.
But we're talking 350 million.
Over a
What
month.
would be your response, Andrew and Oshana? The minister is saying, you tell us where we're going to get this money from. Swami thinks it's an entirely unfair question. You don't have the figures. But you can do some rough calculations. You could take what the gross income is, you could take what their expenditure is, where it's recorded in the capital, and you realize it's easy to find that money.
If you're an economist.
I mean, if I'm to speculate, and this is me suggesting, and I've heard some private schools have done this as part of their citizenship commitment to making sure that they give back, so to speak. Because I believe I heard the Minister Jordan, he spoke around the fact that a lot of these private schools are generating a lot of cash. For me, I think
Then he should be getting his taxes from it. That's not an issue then.
Exactly.
He should be getting his taxes from it.
well, that's
Such a weak argument.
He needs to use, not cutting you, Andrew, he needs to use the body that is in charge of enforcement of the law and get the revenue. Because if they're saying, the argument is, 6 to 7% of private schools not paying their taxes, well, then you need to go after them to pay their
If
taxes.
you know that.
If you know that, go after them, let them pay their taxes. If they're not paying their taxes, shut them down.
And they know who
That
the
is your power.
schools are.
Shut them down. You know who the schools are. You can't tell
That's a
the 8
dereliction of
public
duty.
schools. Exactly. You can't tell the 8 public schools, oh, y'all making how much ever billions of dollars, then just tax your students, tax the parents. The public schools are not paying, even not away from the public schools, their businesses they're claiming that are under the radar, they're going after them. But go after them and let them pay their taxes, and that's where you're going to find the 350 billion, million, how much ever dollars they want. Open up the country to investment. You can't be taxing everything. You can't build a country on taxes. You have to give incentives to these business people to continue to invest their money, and then you're going to get your taxes come April 30th. But I'm not sure was the tactic that they're actually playing here.
Andrew?
my colleague is very passionate in that regard.
I
And
am,
I've shared
because I'm dealing with it day to day.
I think, to answer your question, I believe, because you said if it's an unfair question, but if I'm to attempt as to where we can probably, how we can help solve this issue. I think in terms of capacity at the level of the public school, I'm going to assume here, because I've heard it, but I don't have any facts to support it. I've heard stuff like the capacity at the level of the public school, they can't cater for the amount of students or children that attend schools. Now, I think if the government would have engaged this body, I would say, what is it? He said 58 private schools, to the point of saying, listen, can you guys provide, as part of your give back to the system, so to speak, can you provide maybe scholarships for maybe 20 students?
But how do you know that's not being done? So
well, that's what I'm saying. I mean, you have to find, at the level of the policymakers, you have to find creative ways, because if we are agreeing, I don't know if it's correct, that the public school capacity in terms of hosting these children, they're not equipped to just bear, not the quality of the education, just the
physical numbers.
Just the physical numbers.
Space.
If we're agreeing that
they can't absorb.
So
if
if
the
we're agreeing that
private schools were to close them out, they cannot absorb.
Exactly.
okay, so if that is a fact, then at the level of government, they need to re-engage the private schools to help to peddle their agenda, because they can use the private school for the betterment of the country.
Because
there
they,
was
well, they
never an
contribute to the
engagement.
country.
There was
what it
never
is.
an engagement. So how are we going to re-engage what was never engaged?
And-
There was
and-
never
and
an
you know,
engagement to begin with.
Maybe, and I don't want to suggest Swami is as old as I am, but there was a time in this country when the state actually contributed to private schools, government-aided secondary schools, they were called. So where are
You're not
we?
in that era.
Yeah, I know you're not in that era, but that's the case.
I
So
also
here it
think-
is. Here it is. You're trying to take blood out of them.
I also think that if let us focus on the education sector, if the public schools are efficiently managed, financially, I'm talking about financially efficiently managed, I think that we can save a lot of money in the education department itself. A lot of money. I think far more than $300 million per year.
Because
Right.
you're spending billions of dollars on the public education system, which the Ministry of Education website is saying is not producing the results.
And if you compare school by school, let us take one of the larger private secondary schools with about 500, 600 population, and take a government school of that same size, you will see that the expenditure
The
put by the
efficiency,
government
yes.
and the return is just, there is no parity at all, you see.
I've just been signaled that we've got only about 10 minutes. I want to ask one, I would like you to address this event that is taking place on Friday. But there's another suggestion that the Minister of Finance has made, that these schools must absorb the VAT. Now, if a school were to absorb a 14% VAT, you're asking it to take a cut in its revenue of about 12%. Here it is, the government is saying, I'm not prepared to take a cut of 0.14%, as you said just now. But you're asking private operators to take 14% at 12.5%. Is that practical? Does it make any sense?
It doesn't make any sense. Because-
Nonsense, it's crazy.
Because come April 30th, you're going to end up with less taxes.
Absolutely.
Because this VAT will now become an expense to the business, to the private school. They're going to write it off in their expenditure ledger. And then come April 30th, you're going to be getting less income tax, less corporate tax. So it doesn't make sense. That don't make sense at all.
One final question before we talk about Friday. Sorry for this. When the budget was announced, medical services were supposed to be vatable. Now we find that, in fact, medical services
Have been quietly dropped.
have been quietly dropped from being vatable to, if we were to take, and I'm not trying to sell ramen free, value-added tax handbook, but Schedule 2 exempt supplies for purposes of Section 18. Exempted for the purposes of Section 18 of the Value-Added Tax Act is a supply of medical, dental, hospital, optical, or paramedical services other than veterinary services. I don't know why they target veterinary. In other words, you have the poor animals.
Yes.
But in other words, this government didn't ask, where do I get this money to move medical services from a taxable
Non-taxable.
to non-taxable, but is asking that on education. So there are two things. Is there is there an integrity in that question? And are we now having to choose between health and education?
I don't
hope
even
not.
think that should be.
I hope not.
But
That
isn't this
should be
what we-
given as a choice. That even shouldn't be on the table. How can you choose between health and education? That is.
But this is what-
would be a ridiculous question if
Mr.
that
Ram,
is what is being
You
put
know,
to
with
us.
all the hullabaloo about that, you know, they never said the public word.
Exactly.
about
You
removing
just
VAT on
told
medicine.
me that is so. I didn't
It was
know.
never publicly announced, to my knowledge, that VAT was removed off of medicine, but it has been. So
Medical services,
why
yes.
can't they do the same for educational services?
And the question about where do we find the money did not arise, though.
No, it never came up.
So why is education being so differently treated?
And that's the question we.
Why?
That's the question we have to ask on Friday,
Why
so.
is it?
Can I offer? Can I offer?
Go ahead.
Because our government would like us to remain dunces.
Oh my God.
No, because don't forget they themselves. It's not good to be a government of a nation of dunces.
How do you stay in power?
Oshana, you don't seem to agree. Well, let's hope that is
I
not
plead
true.
the fifth on that
Yeah.
one.
Everything that they have done so far
Okay,
has pointed in that direction.
let's talk about what happens on Friday. Now, the government has not said who will be attending.
Right.
That's the first issue.
They'll
It
send the wrong
doesn't.
minister.
It doesn't say what format this
It's
will
gonna
take. It hasn't said what objective is intended to be achieved.
But the history will
What do you, as parents and mature students, sorry, what do you expect to come out of this, given those negatives that I've identified a moment ago?
Well, you don't know really what you're walking into on Friday. It seems so from what you're saying, right?
Well, do you have more information?
No. So we just don't know what we are going into. So when we go into a kind of a setup where we are allowed to speak, but you're really not going to be effective, right? So this is what I see happening. Now, we understand that the minister was supposed to have brought this matter to cabinet yesterday. And if it did, what really was the outcome of that cabinet discussion in the matter? Is it Friday? Is that the outcome?
The cabinet doesn't. I don't think we're meeting cabinet on Friday.
No, what I mean to say that the cabinet decision last night was to
Delegate.
have the meeting
Have the
on
meeting on Friday.
on Friday.
Yeah.
Was that?
Yeah, the cabinet's decision was that they would have a supposed consultation on Friday.
With
But the supposed
stakeholders.
consultation, we don't know what we're getting into.
That's
But
right.
let's look
Right.
at the history of their consultations. They had one at Wales Sugar Estate. Who were the ministers that went? There was a minister of agriculture who had very little to say. This is about the severance pay for the sugar workers. Minister of Agriculture had very little to say. They took the Minister of Public Security, Mr. Ramjatan. What he was doing there, I have no idea. They took the Minister of Telecommunications, Miss Cathy Hughes. What she was doing there, I have no idea. Because neither of those two portfolios concern sugar. Likewise, I expect come Friday, the Minister of Education is going to be there, but there no other, I don't expect to see Mr. Jordan there.
Let's hope he's.
I would be greatly surprised if Mr. Jordan turns up.
Andrew, do you share that pessimism?
I actually don't.
And what do you
Because
expect out of Friday's encounter?
I expect parents to be out there in their numbers, and I'll use this platform to encourage
By all
our
means.
parents to come out, regardless of, make that sacrifice. I believe the time it's 11 or
11 in the morning.
11 in
Yeah.
the morning. Ask your employer for some time off. It's very important that you show that level of solidarity for all of the schools affected. In fact, all of the children affected. As a parent, I believe these ministers whom are responsible for the policies, when you sit at night, hopefully maybe the Minister of Education is listening to this program. Find it in your heart, because sometimes, I can see how things are put. The government needs money. You're there being responsible for education. and an argument is placed that, you know, you said 350 million.
I'm merely repeating what they said. Yeah, I don't know.
And to me, I believe something is going to happen positive. I'm optimistic, unlike my colleague to the left, and I believe that the government will hear the cry, and hopefully we can have that ultimate objective, which is the removal of VAT on our education.
Oshana, you're his colleague to the right.
I want to keep an open mind. I really want to keep an open mind. I'm hoping that we're going to make great strides on Friday's meeting, and that will eventually lead to the complete repealing of this VAT on education. I'm hoping, I'm hopeful, and I'm praying for that to happen. I don't know if it is so because my colleague to the is saying
left.
not a bit of it, but I'm hopeful. I mean, yes, the meeting with the minister today, he listened patiently, but he did say that he heard our cries and he will take it to the necessary parties involved. Swami, he did say that, and we take that. He took the time. We took that away from the meeting, and we hope that that translates into Friday's meeting as well.
I am not very hopeful that much will come out, but I'm still also of the view that Friday should not necessarily be the end of everything. That there needs to be a groundswell of support for this movement.
Yeah.
There has to be growing opposition, and if that comes, I think that is what is going to force changes.
Yeah.
And so we are hoping that eventually this resistance to this VAT on education will grow to such a significant extent that the government will have no choice but to bow to the will of people.
Do you know if the private schools, both of you are connected to maize, Swami, your nation, Swami, your the
SVN.
SVN, are the schools going to be giving the students, because students are the real victims here, students and the parents, are they going to be giving time off to the parents, the children, and even the teachers to go there to provide maybe information? Because if the government maybe has not heard everything, and this is an opportunity for them to hear, then they need to have as many parents, as many children, because they're the biggest stakeholder in all of this.
Well, Friday actually school is closing.
Closing, yes.
So whether or not the schools give permission, I think each parent should take it upon themselves to make the time to be there. And if you can walk with your child, do so. Because Friday, the last day of school, there's nothing really going on. You just collect your report card. There's no work being done. So the school should support.
In public schools?
In private schools too.
Oh, is that so?
Yes,
Oh,
because my daughter's in grade 1, and on Fridays, you get a chance to relax the last day of school. You collect your report, your parents go in and meet with the teacher, and so on. So we're encouraging all parents to come out. Bring your children, come out and support that meeting on Friday so that our voices are heard resoundingly loud.
I must, at this point, say thank you so very much.
Thank you very much.
You've done a great job.
Thank you for having
Congratulations.
us.
And I would look forward to having you once again. Okay, operators and viewers, thank you. Good night. You've heard that there is this consultation at the National Cultural Center, Friday, April 7th at 11 a.m. You should aim to get there by 10:30, when you will be able to express the position of parents, students, administrators on the imposition of a 14% VAT on education. So once again, thank you, good night. See you next week.